Hi disciples, this is Jetsu, and if you're new to my channel, welcome, welcome, welcome. And for those coming back, thank you for coming back to my channel. On my channel, I talk about God, His love for us, His Son, and His Son coming back. And today I'm going to talk about when we get a role and how we play that role. So when we get a role, a new position, or whatever it may be, sometimes the role, sometimes someone already was in that position before you take over that role, if it's not a new role they created. And what can happen, that person who was in that role for, could be for a short time or for a long time, they could make a whole mess of that role. A whole mess. They could create a whole mess. And what happened, once you get that role and take over, you have to clean up a whole mess that was made by that person who was in that role, your predecessor who was in that role prior to you getting that role. But if it's a new role and it's created, newly created role, then you implement a new strategic plan to execute whatever the role calls for. So it make it a little bit easier because you now can put a stamp on it because it's a new role and no one else have ever been in that role. But when the role is created before and then someone leaving that role and you are filling in that role, then it's a whole different stories, because sometimes, like I said, whoever was in that role before did not stick by the plan, did not abide by rule, and they create a whole lot of mess in that role. And once you're in that role, it's your job to clean up the mess. And if you don't clean up the mess, it's going to fall on your shoulder, because you have to remember, a lot of us, it's a human nature to have just tunnel vision and they can't see out the box. So therefore, even though they know someone else was in that role and make that mess, you now step in that role, the blame could fall on you, to clean up the role, but also fingers could point at you, even though they know you are not the one who make all that mess. So it's human nature to pick and to, do and say whatever they does best, which is creating problem. But anyway, what I'm talking about today, I'm going to talk about Hezekiah and see the role he stepped in and who was in that role before Hezekiah. So Hezekiah came to the throne, as we read, about age 25. So he was pretty young and need a lot of guidance. So he was the king of Judah, and he came to the throne at a very young age. So who was in that role before Hezekiah? His father Ahaz. Ahaz was in that role before Hezekiah. And I am telling you, my fellow disciples and watchers, he made a whole mess of the role. A whole mess of that role Ahaz's father made. What Hezekiah father did and the role he left for his son to step in, he created a whole mess. He joined, what I should say, at that time, this Assyrian was Jerusalem was subservient to the Assyrian at that time, because like I told you before, the Syrian is expansionists, they were coming. So Jerusalem was subservient to the Assyrian at that time. So guess what, my disciples, what Ahaz, Hezekiah's father, did? He took not only the gold and silver, whatever, from the temple of Jerusalem, but also from the palace. So he took a lot of Jerusalem wealth and handed it over to the Syrian you'd say in tribune. So he hands it over to the Assyrian. Not only did Ahaz hand over the wealth of Jerusalem to the Assyrian, because like I said, Jerusalem was subservient to the Assyrian, so he handed over. So not only did he hand over the wealth, guess what? He pays into the paganism of the Assyrian. He brought paganism on the land and introduced it to the children of Israel, having them now worship in pagan gods. Worshipping pagan gods, not listening to Yahweh, not complying by all the rules and regulations that Moses and down to them that God gave Moses. So Ahaz was a terrible, terrible king ruling the children of Israel at that time. He was not compassionate. He was not following Yahweh rules and regulation of the ancient rule and the God of Israel that the children of Israel were known to comply and follow. So he make a mess of that role. So what happened when Hezekiah took over that role as a young adult? He now has to clean up all that mess that his father made. He has to get rid of the false god out of Jerusalem, off of the face of the land. He has to clean up. So Hezekiah spent most of his reign lasts, as we read, about 29 years. Can you believe it? All that time, Hezekiah was cleaning up false god, cleaning up the mess of the land. So he spent a lot of his reign cleaning up the false gods out of the land. But the contrast between Hezekiah and his father, my disciple, is that Hezekiah sticks to the ancient ruling and the ancient law of the one and true God that they know, Yahweh. So his rule is totally different from his father. Hezekiah not only followed the rules and that Moses laid down and worshiping Yahweh, the true one and true living God, but Hezekiah also was genuinely love God. Not just love God. He was genuinely love God. And God knows that. God sees that. All of us, me, you, all of us as flaws. And guess what? God is looking down, like I always says. And he saw everything. Because one thing we have to remember, God is omnipresent. Means he's present everywhere. We can't hide from God. We cannot hide from God. He saw everything. He's omni in everything. Omnipresent everything. So we cannot hide. We can hide from men. We can say whatever we want to say. And someone don't hear. But guess what? God saw everything. God hears everything. God knows everything. God sees everything. So God looked down. And Hezekiah trying to clean the land. So what Hezekiah did with the king of Egypt, there was some form of rebellion or something going on at that time, because they have a lot of trade routes and a lot of oppression going on, a lot of conflicts going on and stuff. So Israel was like a hot cake. Everybody wants a slice, a hot cake. So Hezekiah, what he does, and I said God is looking down, and God saw his heart. The Egyptian, the king of Egypt at that time, I forgot his name, wanted Hezekiah to comply, to join with him. Whatever the uproar was, the rebellion was, whatever it was, he wanted Hezekiah to join with him. Hezekiah said, wait a minute, I know Yahweh, the God, he's thy God. From ancient time, from Moses' time, beyond from Abraham time. And I'm not like my father. I'm the opposite of my father. And I know him. No, I'm not going to join. I'm not going to comply. I'm going to just leave it to God. I'm going to rely on God. So Hezekiah relied on Yahweh. He did not join with the Egyptian. I believe it was against the Assyrian. So Hezekiah said, no, I'm coming out of that one. I don't want to be in that one. God is looking down. And what God did, because so Hezekiah now, he left the victory for God. So Hezekiah just step back, let God do what God does best, the victory. So God look at Hezekiah, and I'm telling you, my fellow disciples, that when we obedience to God, because Hezekiah was obedience to God, so by him doing all of those stuff, it means that he was very obedient to God. So when we obedience to God, we don't know how God is going to play the role. We don't know. God plays role in different ways. You may ask him to do things for you in this way, but he plays another role. I've seen it happen in my own life. So Hezekiah lay back. Below, behold, the victory by God. God looked down and God said, Hezekiah, my son, you follow the one and true living Yahweh, the God, the one and true God of this land. Guess what, Hezekiah? Hezekiah was now sick. God allowed Hezekiah an additional 15 more years to his life. 15 more years. I'm sure we all would probably want 15 more years. But the way things are going now, I don't know if we want any more. Because who wants to live? Who wants to be around when things get worse than what we saw going on today? It's getting into what they call beyond the wild, wild west. And this is like I told you, my disciples, all my advisors, this is only the tip of the iceberg, the Bible said. Bible said, it's gradually going to increase the birth pain. So what we are looking at today, and we thought it's bad, no. It's going to be unbearable. Now it's bearable. We're looking at stuff and it's bad and it's bearable. But it's going to get to the point where it's unbearable. Maximum tribulation. You don't want to be around for that. I don't want to be around for that. There's not going to be any love. Everything is going to break down in society. It's going to be a complete breakdown of society. Who wants to be around for that? I don't think we who seeking after God wants to be around for that. It's going to be beyond unbearable. Because the Bible told us, and like I said before, God's word cannot pass away. Before what he said is going to happen. It has to happen first. So, obedience, it's all about obedience. So, obedience, Hezekiah, obedience to God. Follow Yahweh, comply with his rule, regulation. And lo and behold, lay the victory by God. God execute the victory. And God extend his ears. So we may never know what God is going to do for us. No one knows. We don't know what God is going to do for us until God, we may pray for something, but it may not happen that time. And God may give it to you in a different area that you didn't even pray about. Because you know why? He said, you're my servant and you're trying to be obedient. You're not perfect. We're not perfect. I'm not perfect. We all not perfect. But God looked down and he looked at us and he saw who is trying and who is not trying. So this is the reason why he said, Jesus said, the animal know their masters. How comes we can't know our masters? We can't know who is God. We're talking about God now. How comes we can't know God? So until then, my fellow I watch his disciples, I just want to say, always remember, God first, man second. God first and man second. So if you like what you hear, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so whenever I upload anything new, you're the first to get what I uploaded. So until then, thank you and God bless you.